Hey everyone, thank you for joining in. In this webinar, we are going to discuss all about mobile app accessibility, building inclusive apps from design to QA. My name is Srinivas. I'm from the accessibility product team at BrowserStack, and I'm leading the app accessibility product portfolio. With me here, Lokesh, who is the senior product design manager at BrowserStack. Lokesh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, it's good to see a lot of folks joining in still. Thank you, Srini. I'm Lokesh. I lead product design at BrowserStack. I've been here for a little over 9 years, and my first accessibility project at BrowserStack was about 6-7 years ago. And ever since then, it's been a great journey to learn so much and explore so much. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lokesh. Looking forward to the session with you. Me and Lokesh has been working so closely for the last couple of products, and we have been working closely on accessibility again. Good to have him on this session. A couple of housekeeping items. The entire session is going to be recorded, and the recording will be shared with all the folks. Also, all the participants will be muted, but if you in case you have any questions, please use the chat window or the Q&A window on Zoom for any questions. And also we'll have the dedicated Q&A section at the end. So on the agenda quickly, we'll get started with why mobile app accessibility is important and how to build accessible mobile apps, how BrowserStack can help you achieve that. So these are some of the things that we'll be discussing, followed by a demo and also a Q&A. So that's mostly about the agenda. Before we move on, we have a poll question for you. Can you please take a moment to answer that? We have many responses coming in. Let the poll go through. Let's get started with the content as well. So I would like to get started with why accessibility is important. Right, we all know that accessibility matters, and then people have been talking about it. Accessibility experts have been talking about it, but also there are like 3 obvious reasons why we should talk about accessibility. And first and foremost being you reach a wider audience by making sure that your app is accessible. So a couple of data points to share here. Most of them are already known to everyone. So 16% of the world population today are facing some sort of a disability, right? 16 population is a lot. On top of it, there is also growing aging population. So this number is going to get only bigger. And from the mobile app perspective, close to 7 billion population using some sort of a smartphone today, right? Being in iOS, there are like iPhone users, Android users, and so on. And out of 7 billion, 45% of iOS users uses some sort of accessibility settings on their mobile phone, and 63% of Android users uses some sort of accessibility settings on their mobile phone, right? So 45% and 60%, 63% is a lot. And what do they do in terms of accessibility settings? They either change their font size, they keep a bigger font size, or change the spacing, or even times like enabling dark mode. So some set of like accessibility setting is being implemented in their day-to-day life, right? So that's why and like implementing accessibility on your mobile application is very, very essential for mobile users at least. And given the takeaway is that you can reach a wider audience. So that is point number 1. Point number 2 being, by building an inclusive mobile app, you can boost your brand reputation. So there are a lot of companies that we work with. So they are like so much interested in accessibility because they see a better return on investment as well. Like by building an inclusive mobile application, they see a huge retention, higher engagement, and even the top of the funnel has been going higher. So from the brand reputation point of view also, it gives you a lot of value. And if these two are not convincing enough for you, then the third thing should convince you. There is the legal aspect, and then there are regulation that's coming up. There is the ADA Act in US. So it means that you have to adhere to 2.1 AA WCAG guideline. And there is also European Accessibility Act, which is like taking place in June 2025. It's being enforced on June 2025. So it all ensures, it mandates that you have to be at least 2.1 AA compliant in terms of WCAG guidelines, right? And so that is a regulation part of it. And so these are the obvious reasons why you should be making your websites and mobile apps accessible. But these are not the only reasons, right? It's like just beyond that. There is not only business aspect to it. There's also other aspect to it, like the ethical way of thinking about it. We just need to ensure that everyone is able to use your product, be it in mobile application or website. We just need to ensure that everyone is able to access your products. So that's how we think about it in BrowserStack. And additionally, from the ROI perspective, which touched a bit on this, right? By making sure that your app is accessible, you get a higher traffic, and in terms of retention, engagement, and so on. And there are like bunch of studies have been done by Forrester, Gartner, Accenture, and so on, and everyone speaks the same thing, right? By investing, your investment on accessibility is not going to be wasted for sure. Every dollar that you invest on accessibility, it's going to get you a lot of returns, right? So this is the business aspect again. So just we don't want to just focus on business aspect. There are other aspects as well. So essentially, for all these reasons, accessibility is very, very important. So that is the takeaway we want to leave ahead with. And second part of the discussion, we want to discuss about why accessible, or what is an accessible mobile app. So what is an accessible mobile app? So it's very simple. So your app should be usable by everyone out there, irrespective of their disability profile, irrespective of their age. It just needs to be usable by everyone, right? I could be a blind person. I would not be able to have proper vision, or like I could have some motor impairment. So irrespective of the disability profile, my age, I should be able to use my application. So that is what we call accessible mobile app. And how do we ensure that your app is accessible for everyone? And the first and foremost being, your app should be compatible with assistive technology. And this is the most important piece, because most of the disabled users today use some sort of assistive technology. Could be screen readers, voice over an iOS, talkback and Android, or it could be like external keyboards, switch devices, and so on. So by ensuring that your app is accessible or compatible with assistive technology is most important. And secondly, also you have to follow some design guidelines, and it should be easy to navigate. Users should be able to easily to navigate. It should have proper spacing, touch target size, proper colors, and so on. And also it has to be inclusive in design. Instead of me talking about inclusive design, I would like Lokesh to talk about it. And Lokesh, can you please help us understand what do we mean by inclusive design?
Hey, sure, Srini. Thanks for looping me in. When we think about accessibility, we often picture it as it is only a rule or enablement for somebody who's disabled or some folks with disabilities, and we're exclusively designing accessible experiences for them. But in reality, accessibility and designing an accessible experience affects all of us. There could be at different points in our lives, there could be permanent or temporary type of impairments that we could go through, maybe some of which could mean blindness, hearing loss, or having more of a situational scenario where you're probably holding a baby and trying to operate a device, or trying to operate a device while you're standing in scorching hot sun. I think what we're trying to capture over here by saying inclusive is that accessibility is beyond just disabilities. It can affect all of us, and it can affect us in different ways, sensory ways, or by ways of touch, by ways of sight, or by ways of hearing. So yeah, that's how an inclusive design could be baked into the process.
Awesome, lovely. Thank you, Lokesh. And let's get to the next section. How to build accessible mobile apps. So this is something we discussed, right? There are multiple ways to look into it. Again, Lokesh, would you like to start with from the design perspective again?
Sure. I think overall, wherever we've originally embarked on this journey, we saw a lot of involvement from an engineering standpoint. But slowly we've kind of come to realize, and the industry is also making this shift, is in shifting left, of course, and baking accessibility in the interface design process and bringing it in the overall mobile app design process as well. But incorporating accessibility checks and testing across all phases of your SDLC is an important aspect. And the way we looked at it at BrowserStack when we first started solving, we thought that, hey, in the process of designing accessible products, maybe design's involvement is only at the design phase. But we came to realize after we got involved in the process, we realized that designers are involved in planning along with the product managers a little bit, of course, in the design phase, a little bit in the testing phase, and a little bit in the measure phase. How they are involved in, So in the planning phase, designers work with the product managers to identify issues that designers will address. They collaborate with product managers and understand what are the different types of criteria there, and how do we achieve those criteria in our context. In the design phase, of course, ensure one of the most common use cases designers are solving for is color compliance and color contrast. So using compliant color combinations is a piece that designers will focus on. They will work towards identifying what are the other different types of violations their design has and how do we fix those violations. They have to also ensure that they create a handoff document for their devs so that the devs and the teams who are consuming this design in the form of a PRD or a spec, they're able to consume this in the intended way that the designer has designed this. So documenting that experience is also an important part of this step. And then every now and then we saw there were folks who would get stuck and they would reach out to the in-house champion, accessibility champion, refer to them, talk to them, and understand what their thought process is around this. Then once the app or the product is built, testing happens. And of course, we are not talking about the designers doing extensive testing over here. This is testing on key workflows of the product, or the happy flows, or the happy golden flow, that as the designers would say. So validating some of these flows and ensuring accessibility is applied is important. And wherever there could be times that a QA person may not be understanding the undertaking of a success criteria, which is more specific to design and experience. And designers can bring in that perspective for the QA team and help them be unblocked. And finally, once the product is tested and we built it and then it's launched, we ensure that we are so that we don't add more problems into our system and continue to ensure the status quo. We monitor our key journeys, and at the same time, we produce a VPAT report so that we can share that with our customers who are keen on knowing what is the accessibility levels that we follow. So, cool. So what happens is this is not a one and done activity, and we don't intend to solve accessibility one piece at a time. We want to make accessibility across the process. So how might we make this a continuous practice within design? By the way, there is also a poll that you might be able to see. So we're really interested in knowing if you guys are using any tools actively in this space. Yeah, please answer the poll. So let's move on. So how might we bake accessibility and make it a continuous practice? We can do this by shifting left or shifting left, since I already spoke about shifting left. And bake accessibility in the design system process. And how we might be able to achieve this is similarly looking at, Ashwini, could you move on to the next slide, please?
Sure. Yeah.
So in the component design lifecycle, which looks very similar to the software development lifecycle, the designers again are involved in different phases of this entire journey. So designer is involved in learning component requirements in the planning phase. And while planning to build a component, we need to understand what are the guidelines, what are the mandates that a button needs to follow, or what are the mandates that an alert needs to follow. So we learn about those. Then we kind of start documenting all of those against each and every WCAG guideline that applies to our components, and how are we going to go about testing this. And as you can see, some of these artifacts, like the sheet that's shared, is an artifact from our own internal process on how we document and ensure for an accordion breadcrumb what are the different types of success criteria that are applicable, and how are we going to test those criteria when we finally want to test them. In the design phase, we use the Figma plugin, and I'm going to talk about the Figma plugin a little later in this session. So hang on. But using different types of Figma plugins, you can also test the components and their compliance to an extent. Once that is tested, you want to ensure that the component dev handoff and the guidelines are clearly shared. So again, there's a snippet. The second image you can see is a snippet that we create. These are the type of handoffs that we create for our developers, telling them what the tab navigation of a component should look like. Again, this is in the context of web that I'm sharing, but similar nuances are applicable to mobile applications also. When we move to the next step of testing, all of these components and a lot of I often hear folks talk about using Storybook. So a lot of teams are using Storybook, and we use Storybook to host our components. And what we do is when those components and different states and variants are created over there, we run the BrowserStack Chrome accessibility Chrome extension and ensure that the name role values, the states are specified accurately and appropriately, or provisions to specify the name role value is there in the component. So when the dev team consumes that component, they can ensure that they get a out of the box accessibility enablement on the components. We also check for complex components such as modals, which are a combination of multiple different atomic elements. We ensure that we check the keyboard navigation of these components and the screen reader annotation also. And that's both of these things are enabled by the accessibility plugin, the BrowserStack accessibility Chrome extension. Then finally, we are closer to now. It's the component is tested. We have ensured that we've baked accessibility into it. Now we're ready for launch, and this is where we publish documentation, and this documentation is consumed by 20 different teams at BrowserStack building many different products, and all of these teams have a consistent guideline on how this component accessibility should work. And while we are doing that, we also socialize this via internal newsletters and internal communication channels so that everyone is aware of where we are reaching with our accessibility targets. And finally, we have now launched the component in order to ensure that every team is aware of what level of compliance we follow. We produce like a VPAT report. This is an equivalent of a VPAT report, but internal. Every team can go to this document and see how compliant the button is, how compliant each of these different components in our design system, how compliant they are, and what is their level of level of compliance, and by when. There are also more parts to this sheet that are not shown over here, but by when do we plan to achieve to be compliant on wherever you see the reds? So yeah, that's essentially in a nutshell what I walked through was thinking about accessibility. I'm just recapping, Srini, just give me a minute. Thinking about accessibility in your interface design process. But if you want to go beyond the interface design process, you shift left and start thinking about design systems and consider if your design systems are accessible, and it saves down the road a lot of time and effort for the designers. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lokesh. It was very, very, very insightful. So initially I thought about design accessibility. I also thought about like making sure that your UI interface or design elements are accessible, but you went ahead and then talked about component being accessible. And you also mentioned that how BrowserStack is following this progress. So that I'm sure is going to be helpful for many folks out there. So let's move on to the next part that, so starting with accessibility in the design phase is very, very important, as Lokesh mentioned. Then second would be to test your mobile application or being websites on with assistive technology on real devices. That's going to be one of the keys. Right. Ideally, as an accessibility tester, I would like to test on real devices with screen reader enabled. Now, of course, like if possible, I would also like to test with real users, like asking my application to be tested by disabled folks, get their feedback. That is going to be crucial as well. But in case if that's not feasible for everyone, at least we need to test our applications with screen reader on. Again, like I would like to test on a couple of Android devices, couple of iOS devices with different OS versions and different screen sizes. These are all very important because like if you're just testing on one or two devices, that's not going to be sufficient. The touch target size might vary. Even the color that is being rendered will be different on different platforms. So as an accessibility tester, I would like to test my application on multiple devices on different OS versions, different screen variations, so that to ensure that my mobile app is accessible, which is one of the important steps. And BrowserStack today supports you with screen reader enabled devices. We have like 20,000+ real devices hosted on BrowserStack infrastructure, which most of them have screen reader enabled as well for both Android and iOS. On Android, TalkBack and Android and VoiceOver and iOS, you can also use these devices. But this step is going to be one of the most crucial ones, right? Testing and ensuring that your app is accessible with assistive technology, not just screen readers, but also external keyboards, voice control, and so on. So that is the second step in ensuring that your mobile app, you are building accessible mobile apps. And coming to the third step, which is following the recognized accessibility guideline, I just want to reiterate one thing again and again. Like, it's accessibility is not just about the guidelines out there. It's about how do you pursue accessibility overall, right? You want to just make sure that your app is inclusive to everyone, and you just do whatever is needed to ensure that your mobile app and the website is accessible. But having these guidelines is always going to be helpful. Like, it's going to make the job much simpler for you. You have some structure before getting into the process. So that's always going to be helpful. And we suggest always follow WCAG guidelines, because they have put some enormous effort into defining the whole process. So always following WCAG guidelines is going to be helpful. And there are two ways to look into the WCAG guidelines, right? There are, like, in terms of 2.1 AA, there are like 50 success criteria, WCAG criteria, and out of which at least 44 are applicable for mobile applications. 44 success criteria are applicable, definitely applicable for mobile application. And we try to follow or try to solve for all 44. But there are also secondary research data from UK government, data from many other folks, and we have done our own benchmarking as well. And one number that coming out very frequently is that just 10 success criteria out of these 44 contributes to 80% of the real world issues. Let's take like 5 to 10 most popular applications in the world, and the 80% of the accessibility issues that you would encounter on this application will fall back to one of these 10 success criteria. So I would ideally start with solving for these 10 success criteria, so that you can just knock down like 80% of the issues and then concentrate on remaining 20%. And BrowserStack today has their own rule engine. We have developed our own rule engine, BrowserStack proprietary rule engine. It solves for 9 of these 10 success criteria. Right. So just to reiterate, following a WCAG guideline is always going to be helpful. But from the prioritization perspective, instead of solving for all the success criteria, try to solve for these 10 success criteria first, to ensure that your mobile app is to great extent is compatible with screen readers, for any other accessibility utilities for that matter. And then you can solve for rest of the 40 success criteria. So that is the way we look into it. And the last one, again, to reiterate, Lokesh mentioned that you have to think about accessibility from the design phase itself, from the design component phase itself. But it doesn't stop there, right? You have to ensure that accessibility is baked into every part of SDLC. It should start from design. It should get into development phase. It should get into QA phase. And even after production, you should continuously monitor for it. So just starting from the design phase is one part of the process, and you have to ensure that it's baked into your or incorporated into whole SDLC. So BrowserStack today offers you multiple solutions. We have our manual products, and we have our screen readers, and we have our automated solution as well. These solutions ensure that you can, and also the design plugin that Lokesh is going to demonstrate, which helps you incorporate accessibility testing in every part of the development lifecycle. So what we would want the development teams and the QA teams to do is, like, whenever a feature release happens, you just ensure that accessibility testing is happening along with the functional testing. For that, we have the manual product, so that whenever the feature release happens, along with the functional testing, you can test for manual solution as well, the manual accessibility tool as well. But more than that, if it is incorporated as part of your CI/CD pipeline, all the manual effort will be taken away for you, and it's going to help you for continuous accessibility health monitoring. So that is when we just want to talk about App Accessibility Automate, which one product we recently released. There are a bunch of manual products also, but this is one thing that we wanted to just highlight it on this particular session. So what this product does is, mostly all the QA teams and the dev teams have their functional test suite, right? They have written their functional test suite to test for their most important workflows. Does it have any UI changes? Logically, it works fine or not? So the functional test suite is already available. And by incorporating this functional test suite with BrowserStack, you can reuse this functional test suite for executing accessibility test as well. And what you have to do that, not much. There are like a couple of steps. One is, first you have to integrate with BrowserStack. And if you're an already BrowserStack customer using BrowserStack functional test execution products, all you have to do is add one single capability called accessibility. And whenever the functional test execution happens, we automatically check for screen changes in the backend. So we automatically check if there is any screen change from one screen to another, and we trigger accessibility scans in the backend. Right? Let's assume that I'm in a login page and I navigate to a product search page. And BrowserStack detects that there is a screen change that happened, and we trigger the accessibility API in the backend. So when the functional test execution completes, we generate a build report for you, and then we upload it in the dashboard. So that's what the whole journey you see in this particular diagram, right? You add a single capability called accessibility true, and it supports most of the frameworks out there, Appium, even Espresso, XUI, and so on. Once the build is done, the reports get uploaded on the dashboard and you can access it anytime. So that is the whole process. The advantage, as I mentioned earlier, it's like very well incorporated into a CI/CD pipeline. It without any manual effort, you can always track for accessibility health. So this is something we'll discuss in detail in the demo. We want to spend some time on this. And before we move on to the demo, we have another poll question coming up for you. Can you please answer that as well? Okay. In the meantime, Lokesh will be demonstrating the Figma plugin side of things first, and then we will move on to the app accessibility automate demo. Lokesh, over to you.
Hey, that's thanks for sharing that, Srini. And I could pick on some of those things and understand and find see how that could be useful in the entire process. And I think we spoke about baking accessibility into the overall SDLC process, but you could also use many different other terms for it, such as spreading accessibility across the SDLC, or sprinkling accessibility practices and checks across the SDLC. I'm gonna quickly show you guys a demo of the Figma plugin that we've been working on, and the plugin is live now, so you guys can check it out. Designers, this is call out to you. You can go to the Figma community page and try the plugin out. So I have the plugin loaded over here. I'm going to quickly show you how accessibility can be solved for, and how it's not just color contrast that we can fix as designers, how we can contribute to more than color contrast during the design process itself. Reducing bottlenecks, heartburns, and overall having a higher cost and cost impact overall, positive cost impact on the overall organizational effort. So I have a Figma file sample ready for you. We have a homepage of an app, of a luxury fashion app present over here. And I'm going to scan this. Before I go into scanning this layout, there are a few more features available over here. We are working on our component scanning bit, which corresponds to the shifting lefter conversation I just had with you guys. And it is going to enable you to think of components and at component level enable accessibility. And we also have this really nifty feature in here which allows you to select, whenever you select a text node or a text component on your file, it'll automatically check for the color contrast of that particular node and tell you instantly. And you can even, if you want, you can fix it. I mean, this one looks fine, but if I go to something like this, you can go ahead and fix it in real time and see those changes reflect here. So color contrast being, yes, color contrast is the most commonly occurring issue, and by volume also it's one of the most commonly found issues. So hence we wanted to enable designers in their workflow to quickly jump into a file, and if they're eyeballing a file, they want to verify a particular text looks like it may not be compliant. So then you can quickly run a check on that particular text node and find out if it's meeting compliance or not. With that, I'll get into the scan layout functionality. So we're going to talk largely about the mobile app scan, but the plugin enables you to run scans on websites and mobile apps. Yes, there is a little bit of difference between the two, and those different nuances have been captured within the plugin. So I'm going to do a mobile app scan, as this is a mobile interface. And the scan ran and a bunch of checks are visible over here. And the first one is color contrast, where a bunch of different types of contrast issues are being detected. You could select these issues one at a time and fix them. But what our plugin helps you do is issues with similar kind of contrast problems will be grouped together so that you can select them all at once within your Figma file, update the color contrast for that particular node. And once I make that happen, those issues have, second, I will update the text. Yeah, so those, after fixing those issues that were highlighted, those issues have disappeared now from my list of color contrast problems here. And you can do this either by selecting one element at a time and selecting freeform values, or even using your own token, bringing in your own token library into the process, and assigning colors directly from there as well. So for now, for the sake of the demo, I'm going to mark this, assume that these problems will be color contrast problems and my design team will solve this. I can leave it open and not mark it as done. And I'm going to move on, move to the next section, which is headings. So oftentimes you have to manually identify what the headings are. Or sometimes it's also, we've seen devs who kind of largely take this responsibility. But there are also teams that are practicing shifting left, where designers are involved in defining what the heading hierarchy and heading semantic is. And in this context, since this is an app, what we've done is I detected the plugin has detected the potential 5 headings on this particular page that the plugin thinks, hey, these could be headings. So it's telling me we have identified these headings for you. And I'll go one after the other. This looks like it's an heading. And in case if we were building this for both Android and iOS, and it was like a hybrid app, same design that's applicable to both the ecosystems, then we would go with just defining them as H, which is the defined nomenclature. But if this was an iOS only app, we can go ahead and call this an H1, call this an H2, and so on and so forth. I can keep marking headings, and as I mark them, as I've annotated them, those headings with the H and H1, H2, all of those that I kind of approved in the previous view have been added over here. So for example, there were maybe some headings like this one is missed, and I missed annotating them for some reason. So I'm going to select a few other text nodes and manually add these. Actually, all of them except that one has been annotated. But I'm going to just, for the sake of the demo, I'm going to select this explore more text and collections and show you how we can add these also as headings manually, and you can select multiple text nodes at the same time and call them out as headings. I'm going to go ahead and delete this one because it's not actually a heading. Yeah, so with that, I have marked the headings, and this is sufficiently definitive for my dev team to understand what the heading hierarchy of this page is. And I'm going to mark this section as done and move on to the next section. Now, if this was an iOS app, there would be a need to define iOS containers. And what iOS containers essentially allow you to do is jump between bigger sections and bigger chunks of the page, which are groups of multiple different elements. But for the voice reader cursor, this really helps in navigating, helps the user who's using a voice over functionality, helps them navigate very quickly through the overall app interface. Look at it like a elevator that allows you to jump between different levels of a building and then go to one specific room of that building, right? So I'm going to define these two for the sake of the demo. I'm going to define these two as containers, and I can mark the first one as hero, and mark the second one as showcase. Right. So this, basically, I'm using very simple terminology, but we would go ahead and define these, maybe call this new arrival showcase. And this section would be highlighted before the voiceover starts navigating into these smaller other links and elements, interactive elements inside this section. It will call out what this section is. And if the user who's using a voiceover wants to stop at this section and wants to take a peek what's inside, they can, using the iOS container functionality. So now mark 2 containers on this page, and there are of course more. For the sake of the demo, I'm going to move on and mark this as done. Next functionality we have is the focus order functionality. And focus order basically allows you to define the keyboard navigation of a particular page. And you might be wondering why keyboard navigation in mobile apps, only screen reader and those kind of functionality should be applicable, right? But there are users who use input devices, touch-based input devices, similar to a keyboard when they are using an app. This is again users with specific needs who could be using the interface just with a keyboard. So for those kind of users, I'm going to show you how to add, and this is applicable both for mobile as well as the desktop scans, mobile app or websites. I'm going to select a bunch of different elements on this page to really, and I'm probably going to select them, some of them in any random order. Yeah. So I've selected these bunch of elements over here. I missed this one. I'm going to select this as well. And I'm going to say add focus order. What the plugin does is understand the logical flow of your app and add different elements on the screen and automatically assigns a focus order flow to all the elements that I had selected. And as you can see, it goes all the way from 1 to 14 here and then continues in a hierarchy. And maybe I skipped a few elements in the middle, but I could have gone ahead and selected these elements also if they were interactive elements. But for some reason, maybe the app, it should be the first thing that it should start with should be the explore collection button instead of the menu. So I can select that particular node, which is this, move it. It's the first thing. And now the plugin has automatically updated the keyboard focus order from making this as the first element to these as the next set of elements that it will navigate through. So it's it saved me a bunch of different clicks. Instead of selecting one single element and annotating them, I selected all of them at once and annotated them in one go. And then I can always review and optimize them if I'm not satisfied with the results. So now that I've provided the focus order or the keyboard navigation for this particular section, there's also a best practice appearing over here for how focus grouping works in case of mobile apps, and it's giving you a guidance. And this will help designers who are just onboarding to design, so onboarding to accessibility design specifically. We have cues within the app which help them understand what the best practices are, what each one of these features entail, and give them like a brief handholding to get started and get some context on each of these problem areas. So now I'm going to mark focus order as done and move to the next feature, which is alt text. All the different images on this interface have been detected, and I can go ahead and keep adding alt text to each one of these images. For example, this was a decorative image. I'm going to mark this as decorative and move on to the next image. This looks like we're promoting a top, so I'm going to say designer top maybe, and call this an informative image and move on. And this looks like another informative image, and I can go on and go ahead and keep defining each one of these images. So wherever they are informative or wherever they are decorative. In case of like if it's just iconography, I might not want this to be red, this particular icon to be red. So I can go ahead and mark that as decorative. And as I am marking them, what's happening on the side of the file is that we are also creating guidelines for the dev team to understand what are the different types of code snippets they will require in order to bake it into their code, and whether it's Android or iOS, what are the different guidelines they need to take care of in order to enable image annotation. So that's alt text. And some of the previous containers in the section that I was defining the containers, those have also been defined here. So as and when you're adding annotations and using the plugin, we populate this information which works as a handoff notes for your developers, and they can refer to this and build this interface as desired by the design team. You must be wondering what happened to the previous annotations. Like I annotated some headings, I annotated some containers, and then some focus order. But what we are doing is, in order to reduce the clutter for designers on each of these features, we show you only that feature specific annotations. And once I'm going to complete this entire process and then show you what all the annotations will look like all at once. So we were on all text. Now this is done and I'm going to move on. And it's also giving me a warning that there are pending images that require alt text. I'm going to skip it for now and say it's all done. And the last feature that I want to show is a more empathy-driven feature that allows us to look at this interface through the eyes of a colorblind person. And there are many different, 8 different types of color blindness conditions. For each one of these, we simulate what the interface looks like to that person. And this helps designers take a judgment call on whether their interface is going to be usable by somebody who has a colorblind condition. So now that is done, I've checked this, I'm going to mark this as done and go back to the home page. So now you can see all the annotations that I have added on this particular page for landmarks, for focus order, as well as headings and image annotation. And corresponding to each one of them, we have notes and developer handoff guidelines that is created over here. The same time when I left color contrast open and maybe I thought I'll come back and do it. So every time I'll open the plugin now on this particular file, I have this as a historical reference and it will take me back to when I click on it, it will take me back to the part where I left it and help me continue my process and come back to into design. So yeah, that's a quick demo of what we've been up to. There's lots more coming in. So if you have questions, please reach out. Over to you, Srini.
Cool, awesome. Thanks a lot from the very detailed demo, Lokesh. I'm sure it was useful. Let me also quickly go through the demo of app accessibility automate that we discussed briefly. Cool, I guess you see my screen. All right, so this is the BrowserStack app accessibility testing dashboard. You can see a bunch of products, manual testing, as well as the test automation product. We will be discussing mostly on the automated test, but I'll just quickly give a glimpse of what the other product does. So you have an app workflow scanner. You have this product for both Android and iOS devices. All of the devices that you see here are real devices. As I highlighted during the presentation, as an accessibility tester, I would like to test at least on a couple of devices of different OS version and different screen sizes. You could see that all the devices that you have here are different sizes. Like there is a mini device and then there is an iPad Pro. Also, there are different OS versions 18, 17, and we keep adding newer devices as and when we get them, right? And BrowserStack have other products also like App Live products. They have a bunch of other devices available. So it's like we procure them whenever the new devices are available in the market, and we have to add the devices here. In case of accessibility, we have a limited number of devices, but in case like if someone is interested in any specific devices, we should be able to add from our own infrastructure. It should not be an issue. So again, so one problem with the existing tools out there in the market, especially for the manual testing bit, is the setup is different. So the dev setup is different for Android platform versus iOS platform. In iOS, especially, it's a little complex in nature. But with BrowserStack, just a couple of clicks away, on one click, you will be able to select the device. So it's going to just boot up the device from the nearest data center. Once the device is loaded, you will have an option to upload the application and get started with testing. So that is the manual testing product. I'm not going to demo that product now, but the flow will be like that, right? You just select a product and then upload the application and get started with the testing. And once the testing is done, all the reports will be saved in the manual test report section. Reports that listed down. But usually we have Android, iOS. Sorry, my internet was a little flaky, I guess. It should be fine now. So otherwise, you should have iOS devices with voiceover enabled and Android devices as well. That is on the screen reader front. And now we'll be discussing the app automated test. So in the automated test, if you are starting with a new project, you can select your framework of your choice. We have 2 frameworks listed down as part of alpha. Soon we are going to beta, which will happen in a couple of weeks' time, and you will see a bunch of other frameworks as well, Espresso, XUI test, PyTest, Robot, of different frameworks across different languages. And if let's say I'm selecting TestNG for this demo, you have an option to start the execution in 2 different ways. Either you can go with the sample repo. BrowserStack provides its own sample repo. You can just get started with it. In case if you are using BrowserStack for the functional test execution, In such cases, you have already integrated with BrowserStack. So all you have to do is just enabling the capability. So what I'll do, I'll show a sample project of mine. So this is the test and this sample project that I have. And if there are two ways to look into it, one for the existing BrowserStack users, you will already have the BrowserStack YML file for in your build project itself. So in such cases, I can ignore everything else. I'll just go and add this single capability. So accessibility equal to true. That's the only change you have to do if you are an existing BrowserStack customer. So what will happen now, whenever the functional test execution happens on BrowserStack infrastructure, we, as I mentioned before, we automatically check for screen changes. Whenever there is a screen change happens, we trigger for accessibility testing in the backend, and we generate the report and provide it on the dashboard. This is for the existing BrowserStack customer. Let's say you don't have an existing BrowserStack account and you want to automate accessibility with your functional test suite. Then I'll go to my POM XML in case of Java and add this single dependency called BrowserStack SDK. Once you install this BrowserStack SDK, and you have to add this YML file, and few configurations needs to be added in the YML file, starting with the BrowserStack username and access key. This will be provided when you create an account with BrowserStack, and you can give a project name and build name and which app that you go into test. So in this case, we are just testing with the sample Wikipedia app and few other platforms. So I can run my test executions on multiple devices. This is an advantage that you have with BrowserStack. You are not relying on emulators, or you are not relying on a single device execution. You can execute on multiple different devices. In this case, we are executing on 3 different devices, right? And additionally, this particular capability will be important to you in case if you want to retrieve, your application retrieves data from your local environment, the pre-prod environment, you can set it to true. All the other capabilities are optional in nature. You can just go ahead and select this accessibility true. So just to reiterate 2 things, if you are an existing BrowserStack customer, don't think about anything else, just make the single capability true. If you are integrating with BrowserStack for the first time, you will be adding a dependency in the POM file, and then add the BrowserStack YML file and add few capabilities around username, access key, project name, build name, the platform support, and the accessibility capability. This is the most important piece of all, right? So once this is done, you can just execute your test cases as you usually do, right? Now, if you look at, I'm not even touching my test case here. So we have a test case, sample test case that is written. I'm not even touching that. So how it benefits you is that whenever there is a test change happens, I'm adding a new test case, deleting an existing test case, or modifying an existing test case, doesn't impact accessibility testing. So there is literally zero maintenance for you once you add the capability. So that's how it is different from all the other solutions out there in the market, right? Zero maintenance, and then like quickly you can integrate with accessibility testing. Now you can see that I have started the execution here. Now, if I go back to my functional dashboard, testing dashboard, you can see a build is being executed. So once the build is done, you will get a report generated like this. It's going to take a couple of minutes. So instead of waiting, I'll just go to a previous report that was generated. So this is my build name. In this build, I have completed 15 executions. So for this particular 15th build, you can see a summary of how many issues that we have identified. In total, we have identified 264 issues for the particular sample test that I have shown to you across different severity levels, and also across the 15 builds, how many number of issues have been trending. Is it like increasing or decreasing, or is it staying constant? That information is available. And also the health summary. So health summary is something like, I have 3 test cases, but I can fail a test case even if one accessibility issue is failed. You can add assertions. So in our case, each of these test cases have at least one accessibility failure. That's why all 3 are failed here. So you can add accessibility assertion as well. And another thing is, based on the issue category, what are the different issues that you are like? Color contrast, we have identified 15, and touch target size 63. So across different issue category, you can see how many issues that we have found out. So this is a summary of what the different kinds of issues that we have identified. Then if you go to all issues section, so all the screenshots are the screens that we have captured during the functional test execution will be available for you here. So all the 24 screenshots that we have captured will be available across the 3 different test execution that happened, right? So if you see here, the issues that we have identified in this particular snapshot is being highlighted, it's being annotated and being highlighted. And also, like if I go to a particular issue type, in case of touch target size, we have identified 3 issues. and all the 3 issues are being highlighted on the left side. And if I go further down, and the 4th issue alone is being highlighted here. In this particular issue card, you will find information on what exactly the issue and where the issue is happening, how to fix the issue. All this information are available for you. So it's very easy for you to understand why the issue is being highlighted. And also you can go further deeper into it. What are the different properties that we have used to identify this is an issue? So all this information are readily available, and it's very easy for someone to look into it and fix the issue as well. So that's where the product helps. Additionally, let's say I have written a test case for login journey, and then one for searching feature, and another one for, let's say, adding product to a cart. And I want to check the issues detected for these 3 different test cases separately instead of checking for all issues at one place. Then I can go to the test tab here. And for this particular test alone, I want to see how many issues that we have identified. Then I can go to this particular entry, and I can find the accessibility issues that are identified just for that particular test case. So this is another level of information that you will get. So that is a brief demo on the accessibility automate test cases. So just to reiterate, 2 things that you need to do. If you are an existing BrowserStack customer, all you have to do is just adding a single accessibility capability. You don't have to worry about integration. You don't have to worry about test maintenance. You don't have to touch your test cases at all. But if you are not an existing BrowserStack customer, you have to integrate it for the very first time, and rest everything is similar. It's very seamless for you. There is no manual intervention required for you to continuously monitor your accessibility health. So that's the demo part. Of course, like manual test report is also manual testing capability is also available. You can feel free to try it out. Cool. Let's get back to our presentation. Awesome. So yeah, there is another poll question coming up. Can you please answer that as well? All right. So you can also take a look at this slide. So where you can see the BrowserStack accessibility portfolio ranging from. So our vision is to incorporate accessibility as part of your SDLC, right from the beginning to the end. Even PDF accessibility is there. We discussed about design accessibility. So web accessibility is another platform that we have. Mobile app accessibility, both manual testing and automation testing, and there is also PDF testing capability. So we'll spend some time on the Q&A before jumping to the next section. Let me just quickly check. Lokesh, can you access the Q&A questions? I'm unable to access.
Yep.
Yeah, I got it.
Are you able to see it, Srini?
Yeah. Just a minute, Lokesh. Sorry.
You want me to share it with you?
No. I just have one question for you. Sorry. So one question that we got no, it's not a question. It's just a statement, but I thought your perspective would be very helpful here. Dennis mentioned that designer or texting accessibility, all they could check is for contrast, but designer cannot check for anything more, right? But I have a different perspective on this. Like designers can check for different aspect within accessibility. I just wanted to get your views on this.
Yep, I kind of covered this during the demo and presentation and showed like a bunch of features. And the more and more teams we're talking to, designers are starting to shift left and starting to look into and understand these criteria. What happens is that if we are not doing that early in the process, it will probably be diagnosed at a QA level, and then the QA team flags it and goes back to the dev, and there's a whole cycle of validation, verification that happens. Yes, even when the design team will design it, there will be a validation or a check required. But when the design team is involved, when the QA team does the same check, there'll be a lot of these issues that will be low-hanging fruits. That'll be like trivial issues or color contrast or issues specific to the layout and the semantics of the page that the design team can contribute to and ensure that later in the pipeline, there are lesser bottlenecks and the testing effort, all of the teams in the process, whether it's design, QA, and the dev teams, all of them can focus on their core responsibilities better.
All right. Yeah. Cool. I can take one question. Are there plan to support testing library React Native? Yeah, if this is for automate, React Native is something we already support. Yeah, React Native based application is also something we support today. And if you are wanting to test on, let's say, Flutter for React Native apps, that is also something that's work in progress. Like, but if you are highlighting which exact library that you're specific, is it about Flutter or are you talking about something else? Then we would be able to answer that better. But we support React Native based applications that is supported out of the box, and also Flutter is something for automation. It's being worked upon. Also for Redux for that matter. Another thing, are you scanning the viewport or full page for web and mobile? Yeah, currently when you the automate product that I have shown you, what it does is whenever there is a screen or when you navigate to a particular part of the screen, we take that viewport and check for accessibility issues. Then let's say you are performing a scroll action. We are also detecting that scroll action and performing the viewport. So currently it's a viewport based testing. As part of your functional testing, if you're not navigating to a particular section of a page, then we are not capturing that snapshot today, right? Because that's conscious call, because we don't want to test for accessibility issues where you don't want to navigate to, right? So that's a call. But if in case like there is a use case, we'll be able to support that as well. From the manual testing product side of things, there are two ways to do the testing. One is the viewport by viewport testing. You just go to a particular viewport, scan viewport, and then move on. There is also something called a continuous scanning feature that we are currently working on. So that is equivalent to how a real user will navigate through the application. You just navigate through different parts of your application. You don't have to stop and scan viewport. We are automatically going to detect for issues in the backend. So that is going to happen in the manual testing product for mobile app accessibility. Right. So both ways is possible. Just that we are going ahead with viewport on the automate product today because that's how the use case has been so far. Outside of your okay, outside of UI accessibility, is there a support for BrowserStack content accessibility? So I have shown the slide wherein we also support for PDF accessibility today. In simplicity of written content. So, but in case if it is about PDF is it's a start for us from the documentation perspective, and there are also other formats that we plan to support. But if you are in case we are specific about any specific format, then please call out Nate. Yeah, PDF accessibility supported today with BrowserStack. Understood. Lokesh, do you see any questions that you can pick up?
I see some of these questions are answered already.
Yeah. One question I can see, how can we integrate BrowserStack phone simulator for end-to-end testing in our CI/CD pipeline? So Akash, the advantage you have with BrowserStack is that all are real devices. These are not emulators or simulators, and that's what we recommend also. Like testing on real devices is always preferred compared to testing on an emulator. And with accessibility automate, you don't have to worry about whether you need an accessibility or you need a simulator or real device. When you test it on BrowserStack app accessibility, the real devices comes along with you from the BrowserStack infrastructure. So we advise or we recommend always testing on real devices compared to simulator and integrating it. We already shared the documentation link, but in case if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Okay, can you write app automated test without using an SDK? So currently you need, Alfred, that you have raised this question. Currently you need BrowserStack SDK to integrate with app accessibility automate, but we are also planning to do it without the requirement of an SDK. But we would like to understand why do you think you want to do it without the SDK? Because the SDK is nothing but a dependency that you need to add to a POM file. Just would like to understand why do you think it's the problem for you? All right.
Srini, just a quick time check. We are right on time.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Okay. So the rest of the questions we'll take it up online. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks a lot for your time. Thanks a lot, Lokesh. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Srini.